4:57 a.m. The Sea of Japan. A vast expanse of obsidian water held in a fragile silence. At this coordinates, the world is at its most vulnerable. Then the sensors scream. A massive thermal spike detected at a launch site in the Northern Territory. T-0. A streak of violet and orange tears through the atmosphere defying gravity and logic. A Hwasong-12 intermediate-range ballistic missile. It is not a drill. It is not a test of resolve. It is a kinetic reality, traveling at 15 times the speed of sound. Within seconds, the projectile reaches the edge of space, carving a trajectory that leads directly over the heart of a sovereign nation. Below 12 million people remain in the deep cycles of sleep, unaware that a multi-ton mass of steel and propellant is arcing over their homes. Suddenly, the silence of the morning is shattered. On every smartphone, in every terminal, and through every public speaker from Hokkaido to Tokyo, the emergency broadcast ignites. Seek immediate shelter. This is a ballistic missile threat. The sirens do not just sound. They wail with the weight of history. For the citizens, this is the activation of a nightmare. For the military systems of the Pacific Alliance, it is the activation of the most complex defense network ever devised by human engineering. 200 miles away, the USS Ronald Reagan, a nuclear-powered apex predator of the seas, shifts its posture. It is no longer just a ship. It is the central node of a C4 ISR grid that spans from deep space satellites to underwater sensors. This is the moment where geopolitical friction transforms into high-velocity conflict. The trajectory is confirmed. The impact zone is calculated. The red line has not just been touched, it has been incinerated. To understand why this moment changed the history of modern warfare, we must look at the doctrine of the regional powers. On one side, a philosophy of absolute look concentrated firepower, designed to intimidate through the threat of catastrophic escalation. On the other, the spirit of Ganbaru, a relentless, disciplined commitment to defense and resilience. The Japanese self-defense forces do not view this as a political statement. They view it as a violation of the sanctity of their skies. At 5:02 a.m., as the missile reaches its apogee of 550 kilometers, a new variable enters the simulation. On the deck of a Maya-class destroyer, a weapon system that was once considered science fiction begins its charge cycle. High-density capacitor banks hum with the power of a small city. This is the experimental kinetic railgun. It does not rely on chemical propellants or explosive warheads. It relies on the Lorentz force, using massive electromagnetic pulses to accelerate a solid tungsten slug to hypersonic speeds. The physics are brutal and absolute. In a traditional intercept, a missile chases a missile. In this simulation, the Alliance chooses a different path. They choose the path of pure kinetic energy. The railgun's rails glow with an ethereal blue light as ionized air crackles around the barrel. The command is given in a calm, steady voice within the Combat Information Center. Target locked. Solution confirmed. Kinetic intercept authorized. This is the dawn of a new era. An era where the speed of the threat is matched only by the speed of the response. The projectile from the north is a relic of 20th century intimidation. The response waiting for it is a masterpiece of 21st century dominance. As the Hwasong-12 begins its terrifying descent toward populated territory, the world holds its breath. They are about to witness the first time a hypersonic threat meets an electromagnetic reality. The next 17 minutes will not just decide the fate of a missile. They will redefine the balance of power in the Pacific for the next 50 years. T+00430. The atmosphere at the edge of space is thin, cold, and silent. The ballistic threat is a roaring pillar of fire descending at Mach 15 toward its calculated impact point. On the Maya-class destroyer, the railgun's capacitor banks reach 100% capacity. The command is silent. The execution is instantaneous. A 3-kilogram tungsten slug is ejected from the rails at Mach 7. There is no chemical explosion at the launch point, only a thunderous electromagnetic pulse and a sonic boom that shakes the ocean's surface for miles. The projectile does not track the missile. It is a mathematical certainty traveling along a predicted intercept vector calculated by the ship's AI in microseconds. The impact occurs at an altitude of 80 kilometers. There is no fireball in the traditional sense. In the near vacuum of the upper atmosphere, the collision of two objects traveling at combined hypersonic speeds is a conversion of pure kinetic energy into blinding light. The missile's structural integrity vanishes instantly. It does not explode. It disintegrates pulverized into a cloud of microscopic debris. Fragments of high-grade steel and unspent fuel are scattered into the Pacific, burning up like falling stars against the dawn sky. On the radar screens of the Pacific Command, the threat simply ceases to exist. The sky is reclaimed, but the simulation does not conclude with a successful defense. In modern strategic doctrine, defense is reactive, but dominance is proactive. Even before the debris hits the water, the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan becomes a hive of controlled lethal chaos. The air is thick with the scent of high-grade fuel and the deafening scream of twin-output engines. Within 12 minutes, 40 F/A-18 Super Hornets are airborne, joined by 20 F-35 stealth fighters from regional air bases. This is the Iron Wall. 72 combat aircraft moving as a single coordinated organism linked by a decentralized neural network. They do not head for the inland command centers. They head for the maritime border. Their objective is not to strike, but to demonstrate that the very concept of sovereign airspace has been redefined. As they reach the 12-mile limit, the formation executes the acoustic overload. By flying at supersonic speeds just outside the territorial boundary, they create a continuous deafening sonic wall that vibrates through the coastal fortifications. On the ground-based radar systems of the northern entity, the screens are suddenly flooded with ghost signatures and electronic noise. Every anti-air battery is forced to lock onto targets that do not exist, while the real strike force remains invisible to their sensors, hovering like a shadow over the horizon. The psychological pressure is absolute. The message delivered to the command bunkers is unmistakable: we are here, we are watching, and your entire defensive architecture is now obsolete. The countermove has begun. While the iron wall of 72 aircraft maintains its supersonic vigil in the skies, a different kind of shadow emerges from the obsidian depths of the Pacific. At T+02500, 30 miles off the northern coastline, the ocean surface begins to churn and boil. Rising like a prehistoric leviathan, the USS Michigan, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, breaks the surface in a deliberate and unprecedented display of subsurface dominance. This act is not a tactical necessity. It is a profound psychological maneuver. The Michigan carries 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, each a precision-guided instrument of destruction capable of neutralizing fixed targets within 1,000 miles. By surfacing visibly, the Alliance delivers a silent ultimatum. Even the hidden depths are no longer a sanctuary, and the silent service is no longer silent. Simultaneously, the simulation initiates a non-kinetic offensive of surgical precision. In the hardened bunkers of the Northern Command Center systems that are traditionally air-gapped and isolated from the global internet begin to flicker. The C4ISR neural link, utilizing localized high-altitude data bursts from the F-35 fleet, bypasses the legacy security protocols of the regional command. On every tactical display and monitoring screen within the enemy's inner sanctum, a single high-resolution satellite image appears. It is a real-time thermal mapped coordinate of the very room they are standing in. This is the ghost message. There is no physical damage, no explosive payload, only the terrifying realization that the Alliance AI has already mapped the neural pathways of their entire military hierarchy. The message is clear. Transparency is now absolute, and there is no bunker deep enough to hide from the digital scalpel of modern intelligence. Beyond the immediate theater of operations, the global shockwaves are instantaneous and overwhelming. In the financial districts of London, New York, and Singapore, the reality of the near intercept ripples through the markets like a seismic event. The East Asian exchange indices experience a sudden vertical drop as algorithmic trading systems respond to the flash of the kinetic intercept. The price of strategic commodities and rare earth elements skyrockets as the world recalibrates its understanding of regional stability. This is not merely a military crisis. It is a systemic shock to the global order. Superpowers across the hemisphere watch the telemetry with grim fascination. They see the speed of the railgun intercept the coordination of the aerial Baydan and the total transparency of the cyber intrusion. The old theories of anti-access, area denial, are being rewritten in real time. This 17-minute window has proven that traditional ballistic intimidation is now a liability rather than an asset. The silence that begins to emanate from the Northern Territory is not a strategic choice. It is the silence of a system that has realized its primary weapon of fear has been rendered obsolete by an overwhelming technological superiority. The simulation now transitions from the friction of active engagement to the cold, heavy reality of the aftermath. The simulated outcome reveals a fundamental shift in the geometry of modern warfare. For decades, the ballistic missile was the ultimate currency of regional leverage, a weapon of high-velocity intimidation that forced the world to pause. In this 17-minute simulation, that currency has been systematically devalued. The success of the kinetic railgun as a viable defensive layer transforms the entire cost-benefit analysis of aggression. When a multi-million-dollar ballistic asset is neutralized by a simple tungsten projectile, costing a fraction of the price the economic engine of conflict stalls. The era of nuclear shadow tactics, where a smaller power uses the threat of catastrophic escalation to bypass conventional inferiority, is effectively over. The technology has caught up to the threat, and in doing so, it has reset the strategic clock. Furthermore, the Iron Wall maneuver provides a masterclass in the concept of integrated deterrence. This is not merely the sum of separate military forces, but a seamless real-time data-sharing ecosystem. The ability to coordinate 72 high-performance aircraft across 3 different national commands within minutes is a feat of C4ISR integration that no singular entity can counter. It is network-centric warfare in its most evolved state, where every pilot, every sensor, and every AI algorithm operates as a single unified organism. This sends a chilling message to any observer. An attack on one node of this network is an attack on the entire digital fortress. There is no longer such a thing as a localized conflict in the Pacific. There is only the immediate and total activation of a global defense machine. The profound silence that follows the event is perhaps the most significant tactical result. In the high-stakes world of strategic signaling, silence is often the sound of a total reassessment of capability. For 90 days following the intercept, the missile racks of the northern entity remain cold. The launch crews are stood down, and the rhetoric of inevitable conflict is replaced by a somber internal audit of their own obsolescence. The mission of the USS Ronald Reagan and its carrier strike group was never to initiate a war, but to shatter the illusion that one could be won through provocation. By demonstrating a superiority that is both overwhelming and incredibly precise, the Alliance has restored the balance of power without the need for a single casualty. However, the simulation also highlights the terrifying nature of future peace. It is a peace maintained by the constant invisible friction of electromagnetic rails, cyber probes, and stealth patrols. The margin for error has shrunk to near zero. As technology continues to accelerate, the time for diplomacy and human intervention is being compressed by the sheer speed of hypersonic projectiles. The victory in this simulation is absolute, but it serves as a haunting reminder that in the 21st century, the line between a quiet morning and a global catastrophe is thinner than a digital pulse. The strategic reality of the Pacific has been rewritten. Dominance is no longer about who fires the first shot, but who possesses the technology to ensure that the first shot is the last. The simulation now shifts from the cold mechanics of flight paths and kinetic impacts to the human reality inside the machines. At T+10000, the silence inside the cockpit of a lead F-35 Lightning II is absolute, save for the rhythmic hiss of the oxygen system. The pilot, call sign Ghost Alpha, watches the tactical overlay on his helmet-mounted display. Hundreds of data points, radar spikes, friendly positions, and the thermal residue of the intercepted missile flow into his consciousness. There is no adrenaline-fueled shouting, only the disciplined focus of a professional who knows that peace is maintained by the steady hand on the throttle. For these pilots, the success of the mission is measured not by targets destroyed, but by the quiet return to the flight deck, knowing that the cities below remain safe for another day. On the streets of the coastal cities, the transition from terror to relief is palpable. As the all-clear signals resonate through the subway stations and emergency shelters, millions of people emerge into the early morning light. They look to the sky, not seeing the Mach 15 threat that was neutralized minutes ago, but feeling the heavy weight of a world that has narrowly avoided the brink. This human dimension is the true variable in any strategic calculation. The resilience of a population, their trust in the defensive shield, and the psychological impact of living under a constant technological umbrella are the factors that AI simulations must prioritize. The Ganbaru spirit is not a data point, but a lived reality that defines the national character of the defense. Back on the USS Ronald Reagan, the Combat Information Center begins its post-action assessment. Intelligence officers and data analysts scroll through terabytes of captured telemetry. The battle damage assessment is unique: 0 casualties on the ground, 0 loss of friendly assets, and 100% neutralization of the incoming threat. However, the data also reveals a deeper truth. The Northern entity's command structure has gone into a total electronic blackout. Their move, intended to project strength, has resulted in a complete systemic paralysis. By attempting to cross the red line, they have exposed the limitations of their own doctrine. The simulation shows that the leadership in the bunkers is now grappling with a new reality. Their ultimate weapon is no longer ultimate. This moment serves as a pivot point for global alliances. In the hours following the intercept, diplomatic cables between Washington, Tokyo, and Seoul reach an unprecedented level of synchronization. The integrated deterrence model has been validated in a live environment. The alliance is no longer just a treaty on paper. It is a unified kinetic force that operates with a single mind and a single purpose. Other regional actors watching from the periphery now recalibrate their own ambitions. They have seen that the cost of challenging this network is not just military defeat, but a total technological eclipse. The shadows of the Pacific have been illuminated by the flash of a railgun, and in that light, the path to a new, more stable era of deterrence begins to take shape. T+480000. The immediate roar of the intercept has faded, but the strategic echo is just beginning to reverberate through the halls of global power. In the capitals of major regional observers, military analysts, and high-ranking officials spent sleepless nights replaying the telemetry of the 17-minute crisis. What they witnessed was not just a successful defense, but the dawn of a terrifyingly efficient era of warfare. The ability of the alliance to mobilize 72 advanced combat aircraft, coordinate a kinetic railgun intercept, and execute a deep system cyber intrusion within a single hour has shattered existing military doctrines. The realization is sinking in the traditional methods of asymmetric intimidation, using ballistic missiles to hold cities hostage, have been rendered effectively useless against a sufficiently advanced technological shield. Across the globe, other strategic competitors are forced to conduct an immediate audit of their own capabilities. From the Middle East to Eastern Europe, military commands are observing the speed of the American and Japanese response with grim intensity. They see the seamless integration of space-based tracking, maritime kinetic energy, and aerial dominance. The message to any entity considering a similar provocation is unmistakable. The window for a successful surprise attack has been closed by the omnipresence of AI-driven surveillance. The demonstration of the USS Michigan surfacing off the coast has particularly highlighted the vulnerability of coastal defenses. If a multi-ton submarine can appear undetected within strike range of a command center, the very concept of a secure home front is a relic of the past. The following 3 months are marked by a phenomenon that analysts call the Great Recalibration. The northern entity, previously known for its frequent and loud displays of missile capability, enters a period of absolute silence. This is not a diplomatic retreat, but a survival-driven reorganization. When your most potent weapon is swatted out of the sky by a solid metal slug traveling at Mach 7, your entire strategic identity is erased. The silence from the northern bunkers is the sound of a regime realizing that conventional warfare is no longer an option and that their nuclear deterrent is being challenged by a non-nuclear kinetic alternative. This silence effectively buys the region a period of forced stability, a peace maintained not by treaties but by the sheer weight of technological deterrence. The global defense market reflects this shift almost instantly. Nations that once invested heavily in traditional ballistic programs are now pivoting toward directed energy weapons, high-velocity kinetic interceptors, and decentralized drone swarms. The arms race has moved from who has the largest payload to who has the fastest processor. In this new environment, the alliance has set a benchmark that will take decades to match. The Sea of Japan has become the testing ground for a new world order, one where the speed of light and the force of electromagnetism dictate the boundaries of sovereignty. The 17 minutes that shocked the world have proven that, while the desire for conflict may remain constant in human history, the tools of that conflict have evolved into something far more precise, far more devastating, and far more final. The final strategic verdict of the 17-minute crisis is clear: power in the 21st century is no longer defined by the ability to destroy, but by the ability to deny. The northern entity attempted to use a Hwasong 1-2 as a tool of political leverage, assuming that the sheer speed and altitude of a ballistic missile would create a vacuum of indecision. They were wrong. The alliance did not just track the threat, they suffocated it with a multi-layered response that spanned every domain of warfare, from the seabed to the exosphere, and from the physical to the digital. This was not a battle of attrition, it was a battle of architectures. By the time the remnants of the missile hit the water, the northern entity had lost more than a piece of hardware. They had lost their most potent psychological advantage. The lesson for the global stage is profound. Strong nations do not need to fire missiles over civilian populations to prove their relevance. True capability is demonstrated through the precision of a railgun intercept and the terrifying silence of a cyber breach. To the adversaries watching from the shadows, whether in the corridors of traditional rivals or the bunkers of regional insurgents, the message is undeniable. The Pacific Network is not a static line on a map. It is a living, breathing digital organism capable of instantaneous and overwhelming retaliation. The seamless coordination between the USS Ronald Reagan, the Japanese Self-Defense Forces, and the automated defense grids has set a new standard for what it means to be an ally in the age of AI. As the sun rises fully over the Sea of Japan, the USS Ronald Reagan continues its patrol, its deck quiet, but its systems more active than ever. The 17 minutes that shocked military analysts have become a permanent entry in the archives of strategic deterrence. The world has seen that when the red line is crossed, the response is not just a counterattack. It is a total demonstration of a superior reality. The missile that flew too far did not trigger a war. It triggered the end of an era of unchallenged provocation. It proved that in the modern theater, the fastest way to lose a conflict is to assume that your opponent is still playing by the rules of the past. The balance of the Pacific remains delicate, but it is now anchored by a new understanding of kinetic and digital dominance. The citizens of the coastal cities go about their day perhaps unaware of how close the world came to a different timeline. But for those who monitor the screens and maintain the rails, the mission continues. Deterrence is a constant pulse, a never-ending cycle of surveillance and readiness. The crisis of 4:57 a.m. has passed, but the technology that resolved it remains a silent guardian, waiting for the next thermal spike, the next launch, and the next chance to prove that some lines can never be crossed without consequences. In the final assessment of AI Simulation Core v3.0, the event at 4:57 a.m. serves as a definitive case study in the evolution of modern conflict. The missile that flew too far was intended to be a weapon of political fragmentation, designed to test the resolve of an alliance and the limits of a nation's patience. Instead, it became the catalyst for a demonstration of unity that was as technologically advanced as it was psychologically devastating. The Pacific has been transformed from a theater of potential vulnerability into a showcase of integrated dominance. The machines, the railguns, the stealth fighters, and the silent submarines did their job, but they did so within a framework of strategic restraint that prevented a regional crisis from spiraling into a global catastrophe. This simulation concludes with a fundamental truth: the future of peace depends on the credibility of deterrence. When an adversary realizes that their most advanced offensive assets can be neutralized before they even reach their target, the incentive for aggression evaporates. The 17 minutes that redefined the Sea of Japan have sent a message that resonates far beyond the coastlines of East Asia. It is a message of protection, of technological superiority, and of an unbreakable commitment to the defense of freedom. The USS Ronald Reagan continues its vigil, a floating fortress that represents not just military might, but the collective will of nations to ensure that the dawn always brings peace, not fire. The story of the Hwasong 1-2 intercept is a reminder that while we cannot predict every spark that might ignite a conflict, we can build the systems that ensure the fire is extinguished before it spreads. As we move further into this era of AI-driven warfare and hypersonic threats, the transparency of our systems and the speed of our responses will be the ultimate guardians of the global order. The lines in the sky and the shadows beneath the waves are the new boundaries of sovereignty guarded by a network that never sleeps and a resolve that never wavers. The script and scenarios presented in this video were developed using advanced artificial intelligence simulations. The military engagement's specific weapon capabilities, including the experimental railgun and cyber protocols, and the geopolitical outcomes, are based on hypothetical data and strategic modeling. This content is intended for educational analysis and entertainment purposes and does not represent 100% accurate real-world events, verified intelligence reports, or official government positions. In the complex reality of global security, the variables are infinite. And this simulation represents only one possible path in a world of ever-changing shadows.